Hello, my name is Marcelo Neri and this is my video for exercise of topic 10. In this topic, we're going to talk about the Cold War. What is the Cold War? Well, basically, the Cold War is the name given to the relationship that developed primarily between the USA and the USSR after the World War II. Now, let's talk about some of the major events that happened during the Cold War. In the year of 1961, the Berlin Wall was erected in the dead of night and for 28 years kept East Germans from fleeing to the west. 1 year after the creation of the Berlin Wall, the Cuban Missile Crisis was the closest the world ever came to a nuclear war. The United States Armed Forces were at their highest state of readiness ever, and Soviet field commanders in Cuba were prepared to use battlefield nuclear weapons to defend the island if it was invaded. Luckily, thanks to the bravery of two men, President John F. Kennedy and Premier Nikita Khrushchev, war was averted. On November 8, 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall happened nearly suddenly as it rose. There had been signs that the communist bloc was weakening, but the East German communist leaders insisted that East Germany just needed a moderate change rather than a drastic revolution. East German citizens did not agree with that. So, as communism began to falter in Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia in 1988 and 1989, new exodus points were open to East Germans who wanted to flee to the West. Then, suddenly, on the evening of November of that same year, the the Berlin Wall collapsed. And last but not least, the dissolution of the USSR. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republicans was formally dissolved on 26 December of the year 1991 by declaration of the Republicans of the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union, USSR. This declaration acknowledged the independence of all 15 republics of the Soviet Union, following the creation of the Commonwealth of Independent States. On the previous day, December 25, 1991, Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev had resigned, declaring his office extinct, and handed over the Soviet nuclear missile launching. You may be wondering what the term Cold War means. Well, basically, a Cold War is a state of conflict between nations that does not involve direct military action but is pursued primarily through economic and political actions like propaganda, acts of espionage, or proxy wars, waged by surrogates. The surrogates are typically states that are like satellites of the conflicting nations, allied to them or under their political influence. Opponents in a Cold War will often provide economic or military aid, such as weapons, tactical support, or military advisors, to lesser nations involved in conflict with the opposing country. During the World War II, Soviet Union and the USA made an alliance to fight against Hitler. So some of the people have the question of why did they become enemies during the Cold War. Well, during the war, the USA allied with Russia because they both wanted to defeat Hitler. Russia was Hitler's enemy, so that made them no act exactly on their side, but basically like their ally. After the war, they went back to being enemies. Uh, it is kind of interesting though. Many people suppose that they became enemies after the war because they never were allies. They were just trying to take over the bad guy, and the things were just back to normal, and they started to like compete against each other. Like, for example, the Soviet Union was socialist country run by communist parties, and while the USA was a capitalist country. uh, and the US was sending agents like spies to Soviet Union, and the USA was sending spies to the USSR. So also the USA was like violating a lot of international treaties, like for example with Korea, Germany, Vietnam, and etc. The two world powers, in this case the USSR and the USA, both had the disposal of nuclear weapons. In July 16, 1945, the USA created the first atomic bomb, and in August 29th, 1949, the Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb. As I already mentioned before, the most serious Cold War confrontation between the United States and the USSR took place in October of 1962, and this was the a war that involucrated the nuclear weapons. Now, what I think about the Cold War is that it was an incredibly pointless and a waste of time, mainly because it was like 46 years of tension for no reason, because there was not an actual war. Uh, Also because the US and the USSR, like, they always threaten each other with the nukes, but they never did it. And why to keep people in fear and in tension for 46 years? Also, spending billions of dollars to make the nukes and not even launching them, and keep the people in panic. And also the the fight because of the communism and the capitalism. Why did people didn't accept the way that they wanted to live? Why just leave that thing alone and be happily? I don't know, but I think that it was mainly a waste of time, and there was no reason. I think it was pointless. I hope that you enjoyed my video, and this was my exercise 10 for the class of contemporary world. My name is Marcelo Neri, and thank you very much.